Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome on behalf of Bird & Bird, HVS, EP Business in Hospitality, and AlixPartners to the latest webinar in our co-hosted series. Today's webinar is all about hotel technology and how it can be used to generate business, drive revenues, and increase profitability. To get us started, we have 4 polling questions that we would like you to complete. Lauren, please could you launch the poll? So first question, please. Which of the following technology projects are currently available or being considered for hotels within your organisation? Please tick all that apply. So we have upgrading door locks to support mobile keys, mobile ordering of in-room F&B, mobile check-in / checkout including payment, touch-free guest room controls, labour planning and financial reporting tools. Please choose now. So we can see from that 75% of you are saying that mobile check-in and checkout including payment is the most popular tool for consideration at the moment. Please could we move on to the next question, Lauren? Is technology currently used in your company to find new business, improve revenue and drive operational efficiency, reduce operating costs, supplement human interaction with guests, instill confidence for guests in health and safety? Again, these are multi-choice, so please make your choices now. And I can see that 78% of pollsters have put down to improve revenue and drive operational efficiency, which chimes very well with some of the themes we're going to be covering today. Third question, please, Lauren. Has your company used the period of slower trading to roll out technology improvements ready for when business recovers? Yes, we have significantly invested. Yes, we have made some improvements. Not really, only those items linked to COVID-19 requirements. Or no, it's too costly. Please cast your votes now. A very interesting response there. Most of you voted for not really, only those items linked to COVID-19 requirements. Final question, please, Lauren, for now. Do you think that a global vaccination passport, such as in an app, would accelerate a travel rebound? Please, can you tick yes or no? And an overwhelming yes from our audience here in relation to the vaccination passport, which is very interesting. So we're going to revisit a couple of those questions at the end of our session today. But for now, I'd like to move on to the meat of our session. And it's my great pleasure to introduce my partner, Ian Edwards, who is in our technology and communications team. And Ian will be discussing with George Turner of Ihg Hotels and Resorts current trends in hotel tech. And Ian will also be seeking out George's insights into what the future holds for hotels and their rapidly evolving tech offering. George was appointed Chief Commercial and Technology Officer for Ihg in February 2019. In that role, he's responsible for global sales, distribution, revenue management, hotel and owner solutions, reservation and customer care, digital, information security and technology. That sounds like a very wide brief indeed to me. George previously spent a decade as Ihg's Executive Vice President, General Counsel and Company Secretary, with responsibility for, amongst other things, I would say, corporate governance, risk management, regulatory compliance, and legal and hotel standards. This included managing IHG's external legal advisors, and I can personally testify to the fact, having been one of George's relationship managers for a number of years, that he was a very firm but fair general counsel. So without further ado, I'd like to pass you over to Ian and George for what promises to be a most interesting Q&A session. And please don't forget, if any questions do occur to you throughout the session, please use your Q&A functions to pop some questions in, and we will deal with those as best we can. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Welcome, George. Thank you for joining us. You started out life as a lawyer, so there's hope for us all. How did you come to be in your current role at IHG?
Thanks, Ian, and great to be here, by the way. I'm already laughing at Karen describing me as firm but fair, but anyway, I don't know, I've carried that through my whole career. Look, it's one of those weird things where I have to be honest, and I say this all the time. The first thing is, it's amazing to be working in the hospitality industry. I've loved. I'm one of these weird people who's only had three roles, or three employers, I should say. One originally with DLA Piper. It wasn't called DLA Piper when I was working for it, by the way. It was a very different firm then, and that's where I qualified. And then moved into what was Imperial Chemical Industries PLC, for those of you who would know what ICI was in the day, which is a chemical business. And then randomly into hotels. But I think that the hospitality business is an amazing place to be. I joke about it because I think that in a lot of ways, you find that you're stretching yourself all the time. And certainly when I got my job as general counsel of IHG all those years ago now, it seems like a long time ago, it was without doubt my dream job. But of course, like everything else in life, your dreams continue. And I just felt as if I really wanted to do something a bit different and contribute to business in a different way, and hence the role of Chief Commercial and Technology Officer, which you could say I'm probably the best person who is most uniquely unqualified to do this role, given my background, 24, 25 years in the legal profession. But I think that, there's one thing for sure, that I know our business, IHG, inside out, and therefore hopefully have applied that, certainly in the couple of years that I've been in this role, to ensure that we succeed, particularly in the commercial and technology field. So yeah, the one thing I would say as well, by the way, is it's amazing that you can be in businesses, in my view. So forget, the fact that I was lucky enough to get this role, where an organization is prepared, even at the highest levels, because I've sat on the executive management team, the executive committee, for what is nearly 13 years now, that they will transfer you from one part of an organization to another. And I think it shows a tremendous culture, the tremendous culture that we've got as a business, and the fact that we're prepared to take or place our bets on talent across the business and show them sort of shifting from one place to another. And it does mean that, and I did this as well, that we promoted lawyers into other roles in the business, thought that was a great thing for them to be doing, and frankly gave them a more rounded perspective of our business.
No, thank you. So look, I mean, the past year has been obviously very tough for the hospitality industry as a whole. Have you seen a drop-off in investment in technology as a result of that tough year?
It was interesting seeing the polling questions. They would suggest probably yes. I think that, look, my view is that the focus on technology is more paramount than ever. And in fact, if you think about some of the key drivers of consumer behavior, that technology without doubt can assist in those. I mean, two things that I think that were clear as the pandemic hit last year, and as we were living in the situation that we found ourselves in, which, by the way, was spectacularly tough for the whole of the hospitality industry. We had our lowest point, certainly in my time in the industry, and I think for as long as people can remember, in April of last year, in terms of revenues, down by what was, I think, nearly 90% in the month of April. One thing that's been amazing, I think, for many is the resiliency of all of our businesses, and of course, partly assisted by support, government support. We certainly, as a brand, as Ihg Hotels and Resorts, really been very, very careful about ensuring that we support our owners in each and every way we possibly could. We sat down as a technology organization, or as a commercial and technology organization, and renegotiated basically 850 with 850 suppliers to try and provide the right level of relief, both not just for us, but for our owners. So really, really important on that front. So there was definitely a focus on technology. My view is that if you think about flexibility, there's one thing for sure, that technology can enable flexibility in so many different ways, and that's where we focused. I also think that, again, it's really important to ensure that people understand that the way in which we now look at technology more than ever before is investing the things that we believe will increase value and that we can roll out at pace, at scale. And so that's what we've really been doing. So I'm not sure necessarily whether, clearly budgets were constrained last year and will continue to be so for some time, but it's making the most of what we have, in my view. And that's really what we've been doing as an organization. And I think, by the way, in talking with many of my peers in other organizations, they've been doing exactly the same.
Absolutely. And you talked there about sort of using technology to increase value. One clear way to use technology to increase value is to get to know your customers better. But a lot of hospitality companies, I think, suffer from what's called the drip syndrome, that you're data rich but insight poor. How does IHG go about using data and gaining insights about your customers from that data?
It's interesting when you think about the concept of data rich, insight poor, because I think we have both a tremendous amount of data. By the way, both in terms of both our, what I call the customer bases, if you like, one being our guests, the other, of course, a phenomenally important part being our owners. Both of those customers are tremendously important to us, as you would expect. And I think we have a huge amount, not only of data that we have gathered over many years through our systems and continue to do so, but also I think we have a real richness of insight. And as I say, we monitor that tremendously. It came through very clearly in the consumer insight trends that we were looking at last year around the flexibility piece, the fact that people wanted, in some cases, to have the ability to book, but in such a random market where they really didn't understand whether or not they could travel. The most important thing was to ensure that they had the comfort, that we had clear cancellation policies which enabled them to get a full refund. And so part of what we set out to do last year was to make that, very clear to our guests, and to ensure that they then can easily flex when requirements dictated that was the case, particularly, as we say, with them never being sure as to whether or not they could travel. So to me, I think that we continue to use, and in fact, we monitor, as you would expect, constantly all of the data that we have and create what I believe are really rich insights, which then push us to think more about, for example, last year, a significant focus on cleanliness, and certainly the elements of cleanliness that we felt would give people the confidence to start to travel again, as we were living and still continue to live through COVID. So I think that we've used and leveraged our information in a phenomenal way for the benefit of the business, and in fact for the benefit of our consumers.
No, thank you. And for other hospitality companies that are perhaps a bit earlier in the journey about getting to grips with all the data they hold, and if they were perhaps feeling a bit sort of overwhelmed about where to start, what sort of tips would you give them about where do you best start this sort of data journey?
I honestly believe, and I think this is a an important part for all of us is basically start with the most simplicity that you can. So for me, one of the things that we're always striving to do is to give guests, our potential guests, the absolute clarity that we believe that they need, and to give them simple choices, simple and compelling choices. So, you know, booking on our websites, you can clearly see a very clear pricing. You can see very, very clear rate categorization. Ultimately, we strive to go beyond that as well, which is effectively to enable our guests to have a greater degree of choice, but simple choice. So if you want to be able to find a particular room type, you'll be able to find that very, very simply. If there are certain parts of non-room inventory that you want to book, it doesn't matter what it is, then you can have the opportunity to do so. You want to add a stay in a spa, you want to be able to add a parking space, you even want to be able to add breakfast, to be able to make those choices simply. And I think that data can, again, drive some of those choices and enable simplification in a way which makes that consumer choice so much easier.
Thank you. You talked a moment ago about owners and the relationship you have with owners. From a technology perspective, does that make investment decisions more difficult because you need to bring the owners along on the kind of investment decision path with you?
Without a doubt, Ian. So it's a great comment, because there's no doubt whatsoever that we are extremely aware of the pressure that not only that we're under as a business at the moment and have been during 2020, the best part of 2020, and as we go into 2021, but the significant pressure that our owners are under. So the last thing that I want to be doing is to be imposing huge amounts of costs for technology innovation at a point in time where our owners can't necessarily afford it. And so one of the things that we're trying to do, and again, it came through in your, and I was really amused by some of the questions that came through, or I should say probably quite really reassured by some of the questions that came through and the way that they were answered. Because there's no doubt for us that we really start to think about how do we assist the hotel to become more cost efficient, to become more operationally efficient. And part of that is about developing above property solutions. So bringing technology above property, which then in my view should enable the hotels to be more efficient from both a cost perspective and a resource perspective, and really allow them and enable them to focus on the area that we believe is most important, which of course is ensuring that our guests are served well and enhancing that overall guest experience as and when those people stay in our hotels. And so, you know, cloud-based solutions, above property solutions, to me are a key element. And that should not entail a huge amount of investment for our hotels. The only thing, of course, we'd be asking them to do is to assist in the practical realities of adopting some of that technology into their everyday working lives at the hotel level.
And do you find that hotel owners are coming to you, asking you to help them seek out new technology and push new technology? Or is it more you're pushing the technology in their direction and seeking to persuade them of the benefits of it?
I regularly attend our Owners Association meetings, and my view is that many of our owners are phenomenally technology savvy, and on that basis are really keen to adopt what they believe are compelling tools. And so, you know, for example, we have a piece of technology that we call Ihg Studio. And the intention behind Ihg Studio is to enhance the overall in-hotel experience. So both in room and in the hotel as a whole. And it has the benefit, by the way, also of, again, creating a greater degree of efficiency within the hotel operating environment, but at the same time enhances the overall guest experience. And many of our owners have been really keen to adopt that technology to provide, as I say, an enhanced guest experience, and also to improve operationally at their hotels. And so I think that's a really exciting thing. And the studio product, by the way, at the moment sits on what I still think is a pretty benign piece of real estate in most people's hotels, which is a TV screen. You know, TV screens have been seen as something which is very traditional in the way that it operates. But what we've now adjusted to is to use the television screen in an entirely different way to enable you to be able to check out through the TV screen and bypass the front desk, to enable you to be able to live stream from your device, to enable you to be able to opt to pay with points, to allow you to book your what we call digital dining, in-room dining. So huge number of different things that, again, and there's more and more features, and we're building more and more features, which I think that our hotel owners are really keen to adopt. There's one thing for sure, however, that I would say, and I'm sure our owners would say, is they do not want to adopt any form of technology that they don't believe that there's a high quality return on investment. And so, and the investment may not be, you know, what I'd call purely financial, i.e. we'd be charging them for it. It could be the investment of their time, the investment in educating their people, our colleagues who work in the hotels, but they need to make sure that they see a concrete return, which of course our owners expect of everything that we ask them to do.
Absolutely. And if we keep on that theme of, and perhaps if we dust off our crystal ball a little bit and look, you know, 5-10 years into the future, what do you think the kind of hotel room of the future looks like from a technology perspective? What would we, if I walked in there today, what would I really notice as standing out to me?
You could almost say, who knows? I tell you what I do think at the moment is that without doubt, it's phenomenally important for us to be thinking about the mobile environment, and we've seen it more than ever before in China. Really, you're almost not able to play as a hotel business in China, particularly a multi-brand and larger hotel business, unless you've got mobile presence. Because we know that from a consumer perspective, it is just the way that they transact. So having high quality offerings through the mobile device is such an important part of being able to be meaningful to guests, to be compelling to guests. And of course, in doing that, in working in conjunction with partners in order to make sure that, for example, we've developed with WeChat a mini app. So WeChat mini app, which again drives a fair amount of business into our hotels in China. But I think using that mobile device in a way which is not just around booking, but is about enhancing the overall guest experience again. So the traditional method of using a device, a mobile device, in my view, was to make a booking, to find a hotel, make a booking. And in fact, my view is that the future has to be that you are prepared to download that app or use that device. And I think that, you know, it may ultimately be that it isn't the case of just purely focusing on a branded hotel application, but being able to use that device in a way which enhances your experience whilst you're in the hotel, even when you're thinking, you know, initially dreaming of where you're going to stay or planning where you're going to stay, and then ultimately right at the other end when you're sharing your experiences. And I think the more that we can do to enable that will be a big part of what the world of technology for hotels will look like in the future. And it then unlocks many, many different things. You know, I'd love to be at the stage where, as part of the overall experience, we can personalize, not in a way, by the way, that's creepy. We do not want to do that, but in a way that we believe, you know, subject to the way in which you wish to interact with us, enables us to enhance your overall experience. You know, if you've told us that your favorite drink at the bar is a gin and tonic, then I would love to be in a situation where as you arrive at that bar, we know that. and as a result of that, we can push offers to you for that favorite drink. And so therefore, to personalize in the most appropriate way, I think, is another thing which certainly from the consumer insights that we've got, people really are wishing to receive in the future.
Thank you. And that's interesting, sort of talking about personalization and the risk of personalization becoming creepy. I mean, artificial intelligence is obviously a hot topic across the tech industry. Everyone's talking about how it's going to revolutionize every sector. Do you see it being a revolutionary force in the hotel industry, or is it just going to be one of a sort of an armory of tools that you have to support your business?
I mean, I think that the question is really for us, not necessarily whether or not it's going to be an armor within the armory or whether it's going to be revolutionary. It's really how do we most leverage artificial intelligence in the way that we believe is going to be most meaningful for our business. And I don't necessarily know whether that would ultimately lead to it being revolutionary or otherwise. I do think that there are some things where already we can see that the use of artificial intelligence will have a tremendous impact in just the way that we operate. So for example, using AI to really improve the service that we have in the customer contact centers. You know, I've got over 2,000 people in a captive contact center in the Philippines, and being able to use artificial intelligence in a way which makes their service to our guests more meaningful, I think is a great use of AI, and something that we'll be developing and are developing to make both the contact centers more efficient, but also to give a more compelling offer. And then I also think that we can use, at the moment, artificial intelligence really meaningfully in the revenue management space, because I believe that AI can create a different way of pricing and yielding, and allow us to optimize across our channels in a way that we've not necessarily had the ability to do in the past, other than, you know, really relying on a whole bunch of really high quality revenue managers, you know, real people for us to do that. And I think supplementing their skills with artificial intelligence is an area which is and would enable us to improve further in the revenue management space, and again really add to our overall owner proposition and make us more compelling to owners as we go forward to optimize their revenues.
Yes, thank you. That's it's very interesting. We've had a question from the audience, which is, what metrics do you use when you're measuring your return on investment on technology decision making?
Well, I mean, it really depends upon what you're talking about. So we're talking at the moment around the way in which we're adjusting websites and mobile for booking purposes. And clearly, as part of that, we're looking at conversion. So really important metric for us there. We're also, without doubt, really careful about revenue optimization. We also know that our hotels are very focused on RGI. So it really depends upon the action that we're taking, and then the return on investment that we need. We looked very closely as we made a very significant investment in totally replacing our booking platform. So we used to be on an old platform called Holidex. In fact, even some of our competitors have a derivative of Holidex as the way that they book, so that what we call our guest reservation system. And we worked in conjunction with Amadeus to develop a new booking system, which we believe that the platform itself has proved phenomenally stable. So again, another metric for us in that respect was, first and foremost, system resiliency, both from a security and a stability perspective, on an old platform that was built in from what was an old platform that was built in the 60s, that we were constantly patching, to a new system now which has a huge amount more resiliency, and of course means that we've got very little downtime. And so from there, even those sort of metrics we find really important. But we've also, of course, looking at things like RevPAR, as you would expect. So on our GRS investment, what we were also looking as an uplift in RevPAR, both from the introduction of the initial platform and as we start to roll out, as we have been saying in the public domain, room type inventory, which is the next phase of our guest reservation system. So there are quite a few metrics. There isn't just one in terms of return on investment, but we're always very clear that we are seeking clearly to make a return on investment for our owners each and every time that we decide as to where we decide to invest ourselves.
Thank you. And as something of a question from me, which is, I've worked in the technology industry for quite a long time, and I see my clients getting frustrated because it can be quite a difficult environment to work in when you're making big investment decisions. And, some tech suppliers can be difficult to deal with and slightly inflexible. What would be your sort of tips to perhaps other CIOs in the hospitality industry and, from the benefit of your experience in terms of dealing with the tech industry generally?
Well, again, it's one of those interesting ones for me because in that respect, it's been relatively new because I'm not, even like you, Ian, steeped in the technology industry. Having said that, I mean, I think it's really about it's similar to anywhere that you've worked and the way that you've dealt with suppliers. For me, more than anything else, is really attempting to create what I call strategic partnerships, which is a term that many use, and that is that having your particularly your highest value partners align really closely with your business and your aspirations. Because I think that if you can do that and you can rely on them heavily, both in the good times and the bad times, and without doubt last year, you can see, I joked about it with many of my suppliers as we spoke to them. And it was really that, and it's back to Karen's earlier firm but fair comment. And that is, I said, as we go through COVID, ultimately, I think I've got a pretty long memory. And so do you want to be on the naughty or the nice list? Honestly, because we needed support. It was as simple as that. It was a tough environment. I wasn't doing this for negotiating purposes. We were in a position where we needed support. And in fact, many of our suppliers really came through for us. And I think that's a great demonstration of strategic partnership because many of them that know that as we go forward and as our business starts to build back, as it's already seeing, we're seeing it in the domestic leisure space, but we're also seeing some real green shoots, even in groups and meetings and our corporate clients as we go towards the back end of the year. Our suppliers know that at that point in time, we're going to want to develop more, we're going to be spending more with them and working more with them. And so on that basis, looking more at that long term and as I say, the strategic relationship that we have with many of them, I think is the most important part, and creating that rapport and that heavy reliance on being able to really be looked after at a time when you need it, and then have that quid pro quo as and when we believe that we would then commit more with them. And by the way, I have to say, I always used to use the same philosophy with my law firms, and that is, treat us well and we will treat you well. And I think that many of the law firms that I've dealt with over many, many years would say exactly the same thing, that that's a great philosophy to have.
Absolutely, fully agree with that. So we're almost out of time. If we could perhaps just finish just with a personal question about what's the coolest piece of technology you've come across in a hotel? And you don't have to name the hotel if it was a competitor.
The coolest piece of technology that I've come across in a hotel. I'm very biased, of course. I do love our Ihg Studio product. I think it's a fantastic product. I mean, the issue you've got is that there's cool and then there can be sometimes wacky. I mean, you may have seen, particularly with some of the local competition that we have in China, some have now got robots in their hotels to deliver room service, which I think is, innovative, but maybe, goes a little bit too far as I'm concerned. So there's lots of wacky stuff out there. But to me, again, it's honestly something like that in-room product for an Ihg Studio, to me, is a fantastic product. And in fact, I know that some of our competitors are clearly trying to replicate the same type of technology in their hotels and in their rooms as well. So I'd have to say that, Ian.
Very good. My daughters would disagree on the robot front, but no, I would agree with you on Ihg Studio. Listen, George, thank you so much for some really fascinating insights there. We could talk about these issues for a lot longer, but we are out of time. So thank you very much indeed.
It's a real pleasure, Ian, and thank you very much indeed for having me along.
Thank you. I'm now going to hand over to Chris Shepperton. He's the founder of EP Business and Hospitality and Reinvention, and he will be hosting the panel discussion. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Ian. That was fascinating for both you and George. Great interview, so congratulations on that. Thank you for handing over. May I just gradually introduce the panel one by one? Brian, can I start with you? Brian Cams, who is the Managing Director with AlixPartners. He's had 30 years of digital and IT consulting experience, so no pressure on you there, Brian. I expect a lot of insight to come from you. Sally Richards, delighted to welcome you. Sally is the Managing Director of Raspberry Sky Services. Sally founded Raspberry Sky 15 years ago, I think that's correct, and helps hotels to optimize performance of their tech structures, process, and people, which is quite a task. So I'll be again fascinated on that. Klaus Koheimer, Chief Evangelist and Head of Strategy for Ideas, which seems to have a fantastic job of the role to challenge existing thought processes, create stimulating conversations, and help bring to life the future of revenue management and pricing. So Klaus, very welcome. I look forward to talking that through with you and hearing what you have to say. Marco Niehoff, Director of Hospitality and Guest Experiences from Value Retail. Marco comes from a hotel background, five-star hotel backgrounds, worked with Jumeirah in the past, with Hyatt and Marriott before moving into the kind of retail sector. So I think the contrast of what he's going to say about from the retail sector will be fascinating. A warm welcome to Nito Mistry, the Chief Commercial Officer of Cycus Hospitality. Nito has developed revenue and commercial strategies for more than 100 European hotels. So again, very welcome, Nito. And finally, but not least, Carmen Hugh, the Global Commercial Director of Owner Partnerships at Booking.com, responsible for defining Booking.com's vision and strategy with partners. So a warm welcome to all of you. We've got about 45 minutes to get through a whole range of questions. I'll be absolutely fascinated by your insights as we go. I suppose let's just start with, the pandemic has forced everyone to think differently about their models and how technology can be used. I suppose the first question to ask is, what digital changes that were already happening have we seen fast-paced or fast-changed during this period of time? Who would like to open up? Sally, shall I start with you on that one?
Yeah, sure. So I guess once the COVID hit, the government requirements around safety and hygiene and also contactless came out, and that really made the hospitality industry relook at their technology. Digitalization is not new for us. The products and services have been around for quite some time, but there really is a lack of system interfaces, and there's been a lack of motivation by hoteliers to adopt it, because of the question is around, do I have the funds to do that? And also, do my customers really want it? So the base was really a low level of adoption, but they quickly had to look at how they could fulfill the requirements of the government. So basic things were put in place around pre-arrival to support the check-in process, and also around the contactless payment piece. Also things like QR codes were put in place for menus and in-room kind of collateral. I think what we've learned now is that the digitalization of the customer journey can drive better customer engagement, particularly around upsell opportunities and incremental revenue driving.
Very interesting. Brian, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think the trend was already towards more use of data and towards the idea of the personalization of the knowledge of the guest and their experience. And what we've seen in general is a trend towards a greater use of data. I think also a lot of organizations have looked at whether they can start developing technologies in a different way. They've had to learn how to do it remotely, and they're looking to see whether they can do it more quickly. And finally, of course, hotel organizations have, like everybody else, had to learn how to work remotely. And we've all become tired of this as a means, but we've also learned that a lot of cost can be saved by not actually traveling quite so much. So I think we'll see some of those trends stick with us going forward.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So we'll come back to that. Carmen, your thoughts?
Yeah, and actually, if I may, before I dive into my answer, I being also like George earlier, a non-technical person, I would actually like to maybe take a step back and ask the audience to really just perhaps take out a piece of paper and write down the following statement, because technology can get very complex very quickly. And we have a lot of experts here on the panel today that's going to dive into all different sorts of solutions. And how do we know this is going to be actually relevant to you? So my suggestion, if I may, is to actually write down the following. I wish I could make this easier, right? For myself or for my organization or for my customers. And if we can get you inspired at the end of this to actually fill in that statement, we've already done a good job to get you past the start line, which is really defining the problem, not the answer. So in terms of going back to your question, Chris, about what trends that we've seen that have been accelerated by the pandemic, I would go back. George mentioned during his interview, mobile. It was a trend that we were already seeing. China is a region that is way more advanced than the rest of the world. But actually, if you think about all the people that were stuck in their houses during the course of the pandemic, even those in demographics that may have never used their mobile to do certain things like grocery shopping, ordering food, that behavior has really accelerated, become supercharged over the last 12 months. And we've seen this in our own data. Our pickup of mobile bookings has really increased in terms of share of bookings. And this is a trend that we expect to be much more accelerated in the next few years. We are actually making mobile first, the mission of how we develop. So across our platform, across different products, it has to be mobile first and ideally app first.
Very interesting. Nito?
Yeah, I think Sally and Brian kind of brought up some interesting points about how hotels had started the progression and the change towards kind of the customer journey and guest behaviors and habits. And I think the interesting thing and a theme for me throughout this kind of whole panel is going to be how that's even changed in the last year or 6 months or 8 months, because we thought we knew what we were investing in and how we were going to kind of enhance the guest experiences, the customer journeys, what technologies we were going to look at, what things we were going to change in our businesses. I think things like infrastructure as well, systems. And ironically, this last kind of 6, 8, 12 months has really changed what I think the individual wants now. And I don't think we're fully understanding what that is, purely because we need to go through a phase of experience to kind of feel it, understand it. But that's going to be an interesting change for me, I think, when we look at how people consume anything, whether it's hospitality, travel, content is a big thing now. The quality of what we put out there from a hospitality perspective is so different, and people's expectations are so different to what they were 12 months ago, I guess. So that's going to be really interesting moving forward.
I think that's very valid. Marco, I assume you have some opinions on that, don't you?
I definitely have an opinion on it in the retail world. And don't forget, I came out of hotel business for 40 years and spent the last 6 years in retail. So I see similarities because we're both dependent on the physical experience. both of our businesses are based on the physical experience. We in the Business Village Shopping Collection are not necessarily on the digital. We are in the virtual selling. So what I've seen is in our world, we have almost increased our spend on technology. We have not decreased it, we've increased it, number one. Number two, we rolled out things much, much faster than we ever did. We were happy with at a certain stage, okay, guys, it's 90% or it's 85% perfect, and move along. And the major thing that we're trying to do, again, we're in the physical world, like the hotel business, we're trying to put more of the guest experience and their choices in the guest's hands. And that indeed, like Neetu mentioned, is, and Carmen, it's on mobile. That's exactly what we're doing. So there's very, very similar things, similar problems in the retail and the hotel industry.
I'll come back to you on that, because again, it's whether we understand, isn't it, the consumer behaviors and how they're changing as well.
Yes, very, very much so. And this is where I think that we in the retail world have gone much deeper and wider into guest data. And I loved what George mentioned. You have the data in the hotel business. You got to do with it. You got to mine. You have as well the physical in the hotel business. You have all your staff. Help to mine that data, help enrich that data. You have that choice in the hotel business, which in the retail business you don't have. You got 4 minutes, you got 2 minutes. In the hotel business, you got a day, you got a night. Whoa, the opportunity that you have in the hotel business to take that physical, digital, make that work and make the data richer is unbelievable.
I'll come back in a second. Klaus, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, thanks a lot. I love what George kind of outlined. I know IHG has been on this journey for a long time. I used to work for 12 years for IHG before I joined Ideas, so very personal to my heart. And I think IHG is probably the best example. So there's really 3 factors. One is customer needs and customer expectations are changing. I can order a pizza with 1 click. I can go on Amazon and order anything I want with 1 click and have it in 2 hours, at least in the US. Or I can order a car anytime, anywhere in the world and don't have to worry about safety, security. So customer needs are and expectations are changing. They want instant gratification, personalization, customization. The second part of that is the data that's associated with that is increasing. 236 zettabytes of data are going to be generated by 2025. And if you don't know what a zettabyte is, you can Google it. It's an enormous amount of data. If every byte would be a drop of water, it would fill the Pacific Oceans 236 times. So that's how much data we're talking about. And with the third part of that is the move to the cloud and the consolidation of infrastructure, which has been ongoing for the last 5 years, and it's been accelerating for the last few years. All we are hearing right now from our 15,000 clients around the world is allow me to do things more centralized, more efficiently, more at scale with fewer people, and make sure that we're providing value at every step of the way. So there have been initiatives and movements happening over the last 5 years that have really accelerated over the last 12 months.
I mean, going back to obviously Ian and George's piece, they talked about obviously data rich, insight poor. How far along that road are we, do we think? How far have we got to go to improve on that side of things? Klaus?
It's improving every day. Actually, just about 2 hours ago, we launched a new product which allows companies to pull together data from different places and see it in one place. So every day, companies are out there that are aggregating data and consolidating data. And what we have seen in the hotel environment is the demand on reliable, trustworthy data has just exponentially increased. It's not just the general manager in a hotel or the head of commercial in a hotel that is looking for data. It's now the banks and the mortgage providers, and it's the asset managers and the investment community, the board members. They're all looking for the data to understand if the right decisions are being made and if the business is going in the right way. And over the last 12 months, with governments being in control, no longer CEOs being in control of what's happening to the business, it's just becoming much more uncertain. And the only way you can create some rationality into that uncertainty is through better data and better insights.
Brian, your thoughts on all this? Are we understanding things far better now from data?
I think we can do. I'm not sure we always do. And a lot of organizations haven't really got a data culture. So we've seen a generational shift, and I think that'll accelerate post-pandemic, where we have people who are more comfortable with using information, and perhaps a generation who will decide that now is the time to call it a day, as we become a more data-rich world. I think it's very interesting, and Marco touched on the parallels with retail. What we've got is that in the UK, the dominant players in retail have been ASOS, Boohoo, Amazon. So data native organizations, clearly there's a difference. They have no physical product, which is one of the reasons they've done so well, because they haven't borne those physical costs. But what they've really done is built relationships with the customer and made it very easy for the customer to transact. And that's a virtuous circle that gives them then much more information. Now, there's no reason why hotel organizations can't do much of the same thing. Again, as Marco said, it's a very data-rich environment. You have time to understand your customers. You capture a great deal of information about them. And I think that there should be a demand within hotel organizations, if you're managing a customer, if you're managing operations, if you're managing product and reservations, to demand the data. And it's actually an obligation on the technologists to serve the information up to all user communities in a fast, accessible and easy way. And I think we'll see that as a big technology shift.
If I may answer to that, I think what we call it's digital clienteling. You're into digital clienteling now. How can you digitally clientele with people to bring them to the physical? That's what the hotel world's challenge is. How good can you use the data to clientele digitally and bring them physically? Same in retail, same in hotel business. And it's that company or that brand that can do that digital clienteling well, that will go into the heart of the consumer and create that loyalty from here onwards.
Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, sorry, I'd like to note though, on Marco's point, there's a huge difference between the hotel level ability to do that digital clienteling versus above property brands level, platform level, aggregator level, technologists sort of ability to do that. So here's where I think, going back to another point George made, look to what you can insource and what you can outsource. Who are you going to partner with, and where is your data going to come from, right? And it's not just a single source of truth, right? You probably nowadays need to work with multiple different data sources, multiple channels, different types of partners to get that full holistic view of your customer base and be able to optimize for that.
That's right. Klaus?
Yeah, I love that comment about whatever Marco mentioned.
Digital clienteling. Digital clienteling.
Yeah. I had a conversation with the former president of La Quinta last week, and he actually said, taking it to a point further, that we should be using this time to educate our clients how to interact through digital means. Educating our guests, not to expect or expecting the right balance between technology and service, and then how do we use technology to enable better service, through better personalization and customization and servicing up the right information at the right time. So that's a great comment. I'll have to write it down so I remember it. Thanks, Marco.
I think if I could say, I think one of the challenges in the hospitality industry is that we have so many silos of data. So we have so many systems that don't interface with each other. So we struggle with that single version of the truth. And when we talk about digitalization, we're very much focused on mobile and the customer. But the reality here is, unless we digitalize the back of house, the housekeeping, the maintenance, the F&B, etc., then the reality is that we won't be able to deliver an excellent customer experience, because the back office piece is still manual and paper and emails. So, the danger here is that from a front end customer perspective, they're on their mobile app and it kind of looks good, but it's kind of lipstick on the pig, because the reality is there's an email that has to be printed over, that has to be walked, or there's a manual process that needs to fulfill that digital front end. And that's a real challenge for our industry.
Very fair, sir. Nitu, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point that Sally's made there, because when we look at the ecosystem or landscape of technology in hotels or within kind of a cluster of hotels or group of hotels, it can be so different. And I think even when you're developing and building kind of a new business from a hotel perspective, those traditional services, or the way that we kind of service our guests in the back of house systems, are very antiquated. And unfortunately, it's kind of like picking a needle in a haystack, because the moment you kind of unravel something, it's not one of those woolly cardigans that you have that you kind of pull the string and all of a sudden you've lost a sleeve. You know, we really need to kind of look at the investment, not just from a guest experience perspective, which I can see why is the priority, because that's kind of the big ROI piece where we can measure the performance, we can see all of the investment and where it's going. But I think the back of house systems and processes where, you know, maybe efficiency and time saving and process is not measured in the same way as we've got a booking and there's cash in the bank here. There's that real unbalance. And I think that's where we need to kind of look at the whole ecosystem rather than just certain areas of it.
I think, Nita, that's an interesting point. And also, if we look at what's happened in a lot of other industries, what people have done is they've said that the core transactional processing systems are the places they're going to stop investing in, because they're difficult to maintain, they're very expensive, and the ROI, once you've built them once, becomes very, very small, unless you're in a place where you're end of lifing and running out of support. And what people are trying to do is learn how to build in a much more agile way. We're seeing people copy the Silicon Valley ideas of MVPs, and we're looking at how you can get to small test and learn type of activities. And I think that's going to be another pressure as cost becomes a greater push as we're in this recovery. People will be looking to say, how fast can we develop really high value solutions? And again, the winners, I think, will be those people that have got that capability and develop that capability.
Yeah, and I think as time kind of has progressed and the way that technology has shaped itself, it's no longer about kind of plastering over the cracks and kind of building systems on top of systems on top of systems to find a solution. I think it's really about kind of having this infrastructure that does exist, but it's ripping the plaster off instead of just applying another one on top of another one.
I think there's generally been an underinvestment of technology in hospitality. We've got a lot of antiquated systems and fragmented systems, particularly if you look at PMS, point of sale, and even now highlighted more than ever, key locks on doors, on bedroom doors. You know, if you want to mobile enable and you want to be able to do online check-in and allow that seamless transition as you arrive into the hotel to your room, unless you have key locks that are compatible, that's not possible to do. So in order to deliver an elegant customer journey, the whole technology infrastructure needs to be looked at. And really the answer to that, I think, as Klaus mentioned earlier, is cloud-based systems, particularly as it relates to PMS and the use of the open APIs, of which, you know, for our industry are a godsend. We've been restricted to interfacing for years and years, and now these systems exist whereby there is open API, makes it easier to interface and design a technology stack which is specific to the unique needs of the hotel, and also enables home and remote working. So I think, you know, if anything, there's a need to look at the investment, and it doesn't always have to be more expensive than, you know, what your current legacy system is as well.
What, Sally?
Sally and Nito, are you feeling optimistic about the things that you're seeing? I mean, I'm fairly optimistic about these new systems and the startups, especially in Europe, right? The new PMSs that are built on brand new infrastructure that are easy to plug in, the emergence of marketplaces, the flexibility that we see, you know, to download apps, trial them out, and then do a kind of a, you know, couple months of free trial and then go somewhere else. Isn't there a lot of optimism and movement in the marketplace today?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, you know, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we were cautious of these players, and is it possible, and are they secure, and does it actually deliver what it says on the tin? And the reality is yes, it does. I think, you know, we've certainly had experience during lockdown of taking you know, albeit small hotels live remotely on these new systems very quickly, very easily, with very minimal. This particular one was no training, but others where, you know, there is a bit more training needed, but they're more intuitive to use. So yes, I think there's a definite confidence building and definite traction, and very positive. And I think somebody before said, you know, when do you, should you consider cloud? It's not should you, it's when will you implement it? I think that's the difference now.
Yeah, I think as well, like it's come to market, the speed at which these companies come to market, the speed at which they kind of change based on what the feedback is of their clients. And I think that's a big thing, because, you know, a lot of these new startups, and like you said, are easy to kind of implement and much cheaper. But it's the feedback that they get and they're willing to take to then evolve their products, which I think historically we've never really had the benefit of. You know, we've just buy something that we've then had to consume in the way that it was built for. And I think that whole API architecture, the whole kind of connectivity, being able to kind of have like one sole data point, even if you are using different systems, has become key to that. So I think that's the exciting thing that's really taken a turn, I'd say, in the last 18 months, 2 years, so to speak.
Thank you. Marco, I'm still intrigued though. Do you think we understand the consumer and how the consumer is changing well enough? Because I know you've done a lot of work in this area.
Well, we're trying to data mine more and more, and we are in a situation that we don't own our stores. Our stores, we own the store, but we don't own the operators. The operators, they own us. So our thing is create the partnership with your brand. And in our case, we consider them partnerships, and be able to do things with their data in order to cater for the clients that they want to bring in or that you want to bring in. And we have a very clear focus, for instance, on the high net worth individuals. Their propensity of buying a lot and more is very, very high. But in order to do that, we need to understand them better. And that's where the digital meets the physical. And that's, again, what I think the hotel business has the fantastic opportunity. You got the physical, you have the digital, put those together, and all of a sudden you get data rich. You get data rich from the physical and the digital. And how are you going to make that then in your communication? And we just had a discussion here amongst retail. They wanted to send a newsletter to our high net worth individuals. I said, are you crazy? A high net worth individual, you know what he likes, you know what he told you, you know what you do, then use that data, which is rich, in order to communicate the way you want to communicate. And that's what needs to start happening. And I think the hotel business is way ahead, actually. They have more data, they have more people in order to activate that.
Are we further ahead, Carmen? Do you agree on that?
I'm not so sure. If we look at the survey results at the get-go, right, only 44% of the audience today said that they really haven't made that much more of an investment during COVID, and only those that were required for the COVID requirements.
And that's very strange, Carmen, because we took the opposite. We took the downtime in order to say, now is the time, because at the end of the day, COVID is resolved. I know it's a big statement, but COVID will be resolved. We will get out of it. So let's invest now in order that when we get out of the curve, you don't put gas in a curve when you come out of the curve. You're in the curve and then you give gas in order to go out. So I think that is possibly, Carmen, you're right, because the attendants in this conference or in this webinar have said exactly, well, we scaled back. We've taken opportunity to say, no, we're not scaling back. We want to go deeper.
Exactly, because it's not just retail. I think retail is a bit further advanced than the hotel industry. But if you look across all different industries, and the surveys that are out there by the biggest consulting companies, for the most part, companies have said that they are advanced 5 to 10 years in the technology because of COVID, right? They've taken that time, this time and space when business is slower, right? There's less opportunity cost at the end of the day to take this investment, make it now, and enhance their offering for the future. I don't really see that based on the survey results, and also comments from Sally and Klaus. There are still tremendous challenges for hotels at the property level to overcome in terms of their legacy systems. And it's not an easy one. It's costly, lots of spaghetti strings or the woolly threads, as Nitu was talking about.
But the guests will demand it. I mean, the guests will compare the best experience they have with everybody else. So they'll look at the ease of dealing with a mobile app from Amazon, and they'll say, why can't I deal with my hotel companies, my airlines in the same way? And so, you know, it is a challenge for technology to solve those problems. It may be costly, it may be difficult, but you know, that's where the investment needs to go, because otherwise the guests will vote with their feet.
There's a couple items, right? George mentioned that they will continue to invest in areas that increase value and that can be implemented at scale, right? And that's been the predominant theme over the last 12 months, right? We will invest as an industry, we will invest in areas that will drive value when demand comes back. And we want to make sure that we are having the right technology pieces in place so we can optimize the demand when it comes back and make as much money as we can. So that's where the money is going today.
Yeah, and we are hearing that organizations are investing, and they are taking this time now to do so, to invest. And the systems they're investing in are the sort of the PMS, the CRM, and the RMS, because that is the golden triangle of the future, so that they can get a single version of the truth from the customer and can personalize as well. But I think to Carmen's point, you know, this is not easy to achieve, and it shouldn't be believed that the big brands are doing it really well and everybody else isn't. Everybody is having the same challenges. Everybody is having the same inconsistencies with technology, which is limiting them today. Overlaid with some belief as well by hoteliers that customers would prefer to deal with human beings rather than technology. And I'm a firm believer that it's up to the customer to choose, but as an entity, you should offer the digital journey. So let's face it, nobody loves standing in a check-in queue for 10, 15, 20 minutes on arrival. You know, we're not loving that personal experience. We'd be more than happy to transact that through an app. Equally, quite often, if you're in your room and you want room service, you're hanging on the phone with an engaged tone trying to get through to room service at peak times for food. I'd rather do that through my smart TV or through my mobile device and app. So I think there's a fine line here between, you know, organizations saying, well, we're different. Our customers don't want to transact that way. And I think customers need to have the choice. And I think it needs to be something that we offer. And it will differ depending if you're a city centre hotel and a large corporate bed factory, absolutely, versus a, you know, up in the country, 15, 20 room luxury full service, you know, experience hotel. Yes, the experience will be different. So I think the key to this is that the customer chooses, and it's customer choice, how they want to interact.
Nitu, your views?
Yeah, I think Sally's point on the brands, and we spoke about scale just there with Klaus, and I know George mentioned it before. I think the investment on scale and pace makes sense for larger companies to kind of innovate in that space and also build in that space. But there is a lag just by the nature of the environment and the industry that we're in, that goes from that space to when it actually hits the hoteliers to then when it hits the customers. And I think that's where sometimes we miss out on, because the concept, the innovation and the ideas are there, and absolutely these companies are doing the right thing, but there is a process, and then there's the reality as well to, does it impact my hotel? Do I need this for my hotel? Is this right for my guest? Because I think where it is a bizarre marriage, I guess, or a balance, because on one hand we're talking about, and what's close to my heart commercially is the guest experience and, you know, catering for the changing needs of the customer, but then on the other side is the investment and the returns, and then kind of going, okay, how do I make sure that I can get from point A to point B? And within that you've got the complication of personalization. So scale and pace, and sometimes they don't always go hand in hand. And I'm not saying that the investments and the changes that have been made are wrong. It's just that unfortunately we live in an industry where it's taken such a long time to even get to this place that we're at, before we can move on. And like I said, that's already changed in the last 12 months. So are we even, the changes that we've made, are they going to be relevant for the customer today?
Well, I think there's two interesting questions on that one. Firstly, are we learning enough from other industries? I suppose that's the question. Because I know the retail sector will argue personalization is something they're getting right, they believe. So are we lagging behind? So that's the first question. The second question that emerges is what is next? We'd like to tackle that one. Start with Klaus. Can I pick on you on that one?
Yeah, what can we learn from others? A lot. I think the whole area of infrastructure, the cloud services, how technology is built today, and the platformization of technology, where you break out the technology into its components. So I believe in the future we will have something similar to a hotel operating system, just like you have a Apple operating system. You will be able to download apps. You'll trial out the apps for free, and then if you don't like them, you'll uninstall them and you reinstall something else. And you will do that according to the capabilities, the specific capabilities you want, rather than buying a software solution that bundles together many different capabilities. So in the future, we will see the unbundling of software packages and the breaking out into individual capabilities, just like we see in all other industries. And if you're a technology person, you talk about microservices and containerization and all the fancy names that probably not many people understand, including myself, but that people throw out. So we see a unbundling of technology, a much more flexible technology stack, and the emergence of platforms that can plug in different solutions. If somebody like Ihg has built their own platform, we'll be able, some companies will be able to plug in components into that platform and exchange information very seamlessly. So it'll become much more flexible and much more dynamic than we've ever seen.
Brian, your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, I agree. Actually, they make a very similar point that I think we'll see a shift in the underlying platforms available to the industry. I think we will see a simplification. I think we'll see a greater focus on solutions and the integration of solutions that support different parts of the hotel business operation, and we'll move away from the sort of centrality of the PMS. I think we'll see a lot more focus on the end customer and making that journey as simple as possible. Again, I said earlier, I think that's what people will demand. They are used to having highly tailored, highly simplified interactions, and they will look at hotels that can't offer that, and it'll be one of the deciding factors. Clearly, there'll be the traditional ones of quality of service and comfort and range of services. But if you make the digital journey difficult, people will find that unattractive. And as I say, you asked a question about other industries. Those industries, the financial services, the startup banks we've seen, the retailers with the digital pure plays, that's what they've done. They have made the ability to transact very simple, and it becomes compelling, and it becomes a yardstick against which guests will measure the individual hotel business.
Fair play, Sally.
Yeah, I think just reinforcing what the other panelists are saying. I mean, my mantra's always been, how easy, when I start working with the customers, how easy are you to do business with, both internally or externally? And I think, what we've learned over the last sort of 12, 18 months in terms of digitalization is that, to Brian's point, you've got the likes of the Amazons, the ASOSes, etc. They are very easy to do business with. We are all victims, to shopping for things very quickly and easily, and buying things that we didn't even know we wanted or needed. And they're very easy to do business with. So I think as a benchmark, the hospitality sector needs to look at that in terms of how they fulfill that.
But that's the really fascinating piece, isn't it? Because we've all changed behaviours, haven't we? And we all shop now online. We build relationships online through technology.
Yes. Yeah.
How do we use technology to maximise profit?
It's hard, isn't it? I mean, if I can just touch on, if I may as well, Chris, the sort of the app approach as well. So with the larger brands, they've been able to piggyback on their loyalty apps, you know, to build out their digital journey to different varying degrees of success at this time. But the most companies are using a web app because they're not the large brands. And I think, I see those platforms, to Klaus's point, maturing and becoming perhaps a one-stop shop for more than one specific hotel or group or etc. So, I think there's real opportunity there to drive more efficiency through apps, to delight the customer more, to get the repeat business, to drive loyalty, etc. So, yeah.
Carmen?
And I think to that point, we've kind of focused on the customer journey up until booking. Once they arrive, there's still a lag between kind of that technology, that kind of speed of wanting to consume the service or the product. We've got McDonald's who you walk in and order on a screen, and you can't check in on a screen in every hotel. We've spoken about room service or housekeeping services. How can we kind of get that throughout the whole experience rather than just once we've consumed the booking or captured the booking?
Yeah, no, I think it's very valid. Carmen?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the connectivity piece, right? What the most successful players are going to learn how to plug and play and make themselves connected to every major strategic partner and data source that is going to be relevant to their business, and then take that data, both pre-booking, during booking, and at check-in, and then translate that into some special experience for the customer. And I'll just give you an example. What we do is we started tracking with the permission of the customer, their own dietary preferences, or if they have any allergies, right? And this data is then made available to the supply partners on our platform, so that when the guest arrives, they can already know if it's a bed and breakfast that has been booked, right? Certain things should not be served to that guest. So this is just an example of where, the journey is going to be evolving. I think, if I may just go back to pointing out, a slightly different angle to this. Neetu mentioned earlier, like the guest behavior has changed significantly during the pandemic. And whilst we all think travel will return in full force, right? Of course, we're all optimistic about that. I personally believe that the customer now is going to want to take certain things that they've learned and experienced during pandemic that is inevitably going to be based around their digital experience or exposure, and then the best of the pre-pandemic, and figure out what that means for them when they travel in the future. And how does the hotelier anticipate that now? I think this is a question that everybody should be asking themselves. And what technologies can help them make it easier to do X? Sorry, I'm going back to my starting point. Hopefully the audience has already written their statement out.
Marco, can I bring you in at this point?
Yeah, no, I agree with Carmen. I said those people, that brand that will make the physical happen, and where it takes it over with that makes the digital happen and the physical picks it up and drives it through. That is where it all sits, and we call it where the digital meets the physical. That's where the sweet spot sits. And how can you do that best? I think it has to do with, we as well in retail, we say, what's available out in the market? Can we plug into it? Can we then try it, fail? Yeah, well, we call it fail forward. We fail, learn, next, and keep on going. That is so important for us, that we try what works. And if it works well, copy, replicate, and move it forward. But that speed of what's out there, plug it in. If you're able to plug it in, develop it forward, that's the speed. And that's where you get into the hearts of the clients, because the clients know what the digital looks like. I love what Brian said about Amazon. I said, why can't we have an Amazon experience in the hotel? I think that is a very, very good question, because it's the experience that people are used to. I buy my stuff with, and why can't we have similar thing like that in the hotel business? Very well put, Brian.
It's a great example, actually, I've seen recently. Sorry, Sorry, Chris.
Go
Just
for it.
to look up on YouTube, if you get the opportunity, is a restaurant brand called Live It, who has put in place some really incredible next generation, real thought-provoking mobile digitalization around, you know, you can order your food prior to arrival, but when you arrive, you don't need to check in at a hostess. You go find where you want to sit, and they will identify the fact that you've arrived at the restaurant. They know where you're sitting. They'll bring your food directly within 5 minutes of arriving, or your drink. The use of music, the use of, you know, smells and sounds, etc. I mean, it is quite an amazing concept, and definitely worth a look up on YouTube.
I mean, that's the exciting piece, though, isn't it, Sally? That actually this could all free up and enable services to change in quite a dramatic way, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And they look at their restaurant, they look at doing, you know, eight turnarounds a day, from breakfast right the way through to late evening. The food is really simple. They don't employ professional chefs. They have, you know, non-trained people working at different stations that are very, you know, it's all about the experience. It's all about, you know, using technology to enable a fantastic experience, and they've had incredible success. So I think it's really eye-opening for the hotel industry, and looking at how perhaps some of those items could be adopted.
I think, Joey, can I just say, Chris, and I slightly argue against myself. Just because Amazon do something very well, or ASOS, it doesn't mean it's very easy for people to copy. And actually, you shouldn't try and become Amazon. Amazon obviously is a young company. It started and grown in a very different way to most traditional hotel companies. So you cannot recreate. It would be too big a change for most organizations to try and work that way. What you have to do is blend the strength of what you have with a more digital and agile way of working, and seek to copy some of the principles of Amazon, not to suddenly throw yourself up in the air and try and reinvent yourself. That's a fast path to a big error, I think.
Yeah, no, I think
yeah, and
right.
George talked to that a little bit about the merchandisation. We see that more and more, and the retail model in the hotel industry, right? Where you'll be able to buy anything that you want that is part of a hotel experience within a hotel or surrounding a hotel, and make that part of your shopping basket when you make a booking for a hotel, or it's more about the experience that goes with the hotel stay rather than just staying in a room. So the merchandisation of the hotel industry is coming very fast. And as George mentioned, and as IHG mentioned in the earnings call last week, by the end of this year, they will have the capabilities implemented in most of their hotels to start that journey.
Oh, look, May I thank you? We're out of time, I'm afraid. This conversation can go on for another hour with ease, I think. So I've enjoyed it very much. So my thanks to all of you today. I know there's some questions in the Q&A, but if you could have a look at those and just perhaps give us some answers, that would be great as well, privately, and answer that. And let me just say to everyone from the audience, thank you very much. And can I now pass over to Russell to sum up, if you can? There's a load of information there, Russell. As I bring you in.
Fortunately, there was not very much to learn this and I managed to condense everything down to 5 pages of notes. Can I echo your thanks, Chris, to our wonderful panel this afternoon, who've done a tremendous job of informing the unenlightened, me being the prime example of someone who's completely unenlightened. And I feel a lot happier now that I've listened to everybody and watched their comments, which I'm going to share a few thoughts with you. Before I do that, I'm going to ask, if you wouldn't mind, please, Lauren, please bring up one of the questions that we asked before. And I'd really be grateful if everybody would please give me your thoughts now that you've heard what we've heard today. Which single technology project should now be given greatest priority for hotels within your organization? So we want you to tick only one of the following. Is it upgrading door locks to support mobile keys? Is it mobile ordering of in-room F&B? Is it mobile check-in, check-out, including payment? Is it touch-free guest room controls, or labor planning, or financial reporting tools? Which one of those do you think should be given the greatest priority? And we're back to mobile check-in, check-out, which is clearly what most of you feel, head and shoulders, excuse the advert, but head and shoulders above everything else. That's clearly the biggest message that you're taking away from that. So thank you so much. We did those polls in order to help guide the conversation, but also to help illustrate, as was done very well by Carmen in that last piece, as to how perhaps we differ in the way the hotel operates and uses technology from other organizations. And clearly Marco was giving us some views about the retail sector, which were truly helpful. Let me just wind back a little bit with George Turner in his interview. What did we learn from George? Well, firstly, that he's uniquely unqualified for the role that he's in, and is clearly doing a fantastic job if he's been in it for so long. So congratulations to you, George. The focus on technology is more paramount than ever, especially within times as we've been going through in the last year, where budgets have been constrained, but technology is enabling flexibility. And the importance to be able to roll everything out swiftly couldn't be more appropriate. We learned about DRIP, data rich, insight poor, gathering lots of data, but getting good use out of that data is another thing. But one of the things that we learned from what Ihg has been doing is, of course, to have clear cancellation policies, clear refund policies when travel isn't possible. Cleanliness led to confidence. And I think that that is something which we're going to learn a lot of. I'm not going to go so much more into what George went through, but I came away with a lot of information and a lot of thinking, what should the hotel of the future look like in light of the pandemic? And I still think 5 to 10 years down the line, we're still going to want a comfy bed. We're still going to want a good night's sleep, unquestionable Wi-Fi, or whatever the word is that's used to describe it, a seamless journey, and personalized where it's feasible, but not to a creepy extent. And finally, I've lived with holidecks ever since I met my wife, who some 40 odd years ago was working for Holiday Inn here in the UK, and holidecks was the buzzword that we used, and it was based on something called the telex. And those of you who are interested can look up what a telex is. But the booking platform, now redeveloped with Amadeus, clearly for the 21st century and beyond. Final comment from George: treat us well and we will treat you well. Isn't that a message that we hope that all our suppliers would recognize? Moving on to the panel, 6 excellent panelists. We talked about digital changes that are already happening, that have been accelerated by COVID, particularly in the field of contactless. And that was time and time again what people do. The data and improving the use of data to help make the right decisions, resolving uncertainty, and the fact that many organizations still don't have an adequate data culture. I learned about digital clienteling. I had to write it down so that I would be able to regurgitate it in this. But using data to bring the guest physically into the picture. Differentiating between what can be done at the hotel as opposed to what can be done at corporate level, or using partners, was also something that was that we were reminded about. Looking at the historic underinvestment on hotel technology that's preventing advancements in the customer journey, the move towards cloud-based systems, the fact that they're a godsend, enabling the better use of interfaces and home and remote working, not always more expensive, and something that was mentioned, but I didn't understand what it was. So somebody please tell me afterwards what on earth API architecture is, but I guess someone will tell me one of these days. The customer needs choice, whether it's a personal choice to have an in-person relationship or a digital one. We, the hotel industry, must provide both alternatives. And are we lagging behind other sectors? Clearly we are, but we've always done that. It's a criticism I've leveled at the hotel business for the last 45 years. But what's coming next? Hotel operating systems that are app-based, the unbundling of software packages, more flexible, simplified, integration of solutions, and a focus on the end customer with tailored interactions. Connectivity is the key, whether it's pre-booking, during the stay, or after departure. And from a perspective of the pre-pandemic plus the experience of the pandemic, we're going to get the best of all worlds. I was quite motivated to want to tune in and find out what the Live It brand is. But my question is, Sally, will they eat your food for you and have the indigestion that you would otherwise have experienced? Ladies and gentlemen, I thought there were some really key learning points in this afternoon's webinar. I want to thank everyone from the bottom of both for tuning in and for presenting themselves and their topic so well. To George Turner, to Carmen Hui, Brian Calms, Klaus Kohlmeier, Nitu Mistry, Marco Niehoff, Sally Richards, and to our partners Ian Edwards and Karen Freeb of B&B, Bird & Bird, and Chris Shepherdson, and the most important person within EP, Lauren Bush, who's done absolutely everything behind the scenes to make sure this all worked wonderfully well. It's been my pleasure to see you today, to be with you today, and I hope very much, ladies and gentlemen, you've had a thoroughly fruitful learning experience, and we will send you in due course the access to the recording of the event if you missed anything. So from all of us to all of you, thank you so much and goodbye.